Great. Well, welcome to the March happy hour, Mark.
Thank you for
Uh,
having me.
do you have your beverage?
I do. I've got a black walnut Manhattan.
Oh, nice,
Oh,
nice. Um, okay.
it's only 3 o'clock here though, so it's a little early in the Midwest, even though it's Wisconsin.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
That's true.
5 o'clock somewhere. And you know, I guess you could say this about any day of the week at this point, but we could all use a drink today, I
Yes.
think. So, welcome to my Substack, to the Freedom Academy. Um, I've been doing for a while, I had, what I call office hours once a month where we would talk about stuff. And I was kind of teaching this online class. But then once I sort of switched gears this year for my Substack, I started doing more of these happy hours. And I like bringing in just cool people that I'm interacting with or that I know to come and just I don't know, unpack the news of the day and what's going on. For everybody who is on this happy hour, Mark and I have actually never met before, but we follow each other on Blue Sky, and I feel like we are very simpatico with at least some of our views on Congress falling down on the job and all this kind of stuff. But I always enjoy your insights, and I'm excited to have you on because I just have been wanting to chat with you and learn more about what you're thinking about everything that's
Uh,
happening.
No, it's great to be here. And this is one of the great things about social media. There's a lot of people from Blue Sky and from, back when we had Twitter that I feel like I interact with regularly. I'm even friends with, but I've actually never met. Right. And then you get to meet them or chat in person. And, um, it's a lot of fun. And I think you're right. I think we share a lot of views on a lot of the stuff that's going on. So I'm interested to,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. So you are in Wisconsin,
I
is that
am.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Uh,
And
so I am a Yalie. So
really,
uh,
okay,
Calhoun
great.
class of '97, and uh, not Calhoun anymore,
Not
thankfully.
Calhoun anymore. Yeah. Well, I was in the Woodrow Wilson School at Princeton, which is not the Woodrow Wilson School
Wonderful
anymore. So
school.
I get it. I get it. Um, so tell me, what do you focus on in your scholarship?
Yeah.
And what? Yeah.
So I'm a professor here in political science in the public policy school, which is the Bob La Follette, progressive Republicans of history. So I'm primarily a scholar of international political economy, so the politics of international finance and money and trade. Right. So I've written books on the politics of the International Monetary Fund, uh, political economy of financial crises, those sorts of things. So most of my work has been on how domestic politics, public opinion, firm interests, things like those affect foreign economic policy. But the other side is thinking about international cooperation, global governance, international organizations. My other hat is I'm the director of European studies. I've spent a lot of time in Berlin over the last 15 years. And so I study the EU and I follow German politics and just generally thinking about transatlantic relations and what Mark Carney is lamenting of like the death of the liberal international order. And I feel like now I spend most of my time, like everybody else who's a political scientist, thinking about democracy, right?
Yeah.
But um, I come at it from the side of someone who looks at American politics comparatively, and I know Europe, and someone who thinks about economic crises. And so big picture, I come at this thinking about Trump and what's going on in the US is part of a backlash to lots of things and the rise of the far right in Western democracies. And at root, that is caused by lots of things, but one of the things it's caused by is the wave of economic crises where the policy responses have not been very good, and it's generated lots of discontent with democratic politics on both sides of the Atlantic. So, I see what's happening with Trump, the same as what's happening with the AfD in Germany and Marine Le Pen in France as Brexit. There's general like both for identity and economic reasons, there's the public is discontent with democracy. And so that's sort of, I've learned a lot from my American colleagues and the people we all interact with on Blue Sky, like Brendan Nyan and people like that,
Yeah.
But I come at this from the international relations and comparative politics perspective of, there are unique things about Trump. And then on the other hand, what's going on in American politics is really not that interesting because it's a pattern we've seen both historically and it's stuff that we see, on the other side of the Atlantic in other rich democracies as well.
Yeah. So I want to unpack some of those bigger themes, but I do want to get your kind of snapshot take. How bad is it?
How bad is it? Um,
Like,
you know,
how many drinks should we have poured right now for this hour?
well, I mean, those are related questions, but not exactly the same question, right? So, lots of drinks, lots of drinks. But, uh, I worry a lot. I'm simultaneously a pessimist and an optimist, right? So, um, part of what I'm working on now is actually on a book about the dominance of the dollar in global finance and what that means for the endurance of American power and American hegemony, like in world order. So I'm actually like a deep pessimist about American democracy.
Yeah.
And I've been accused of being an inveterate optimist about like America's economic dominance and power in the international system. Right. And I worry a lot about we are breaking everything in terms of institutions at home and at the international level. I worry a lot less when people are like, this is the end of America and our role in the world, and China is going to take over. And you know, we've been an ugly hegemon in many ways for 85 years. And this is an evolution of what we've done. But in many ways is actually similar to lots of things that we've done since the 1970s of not following the rules and institutions at the international level. So I'm less pessimistic, like when Mark Carney gets up and basically says like it's all over about transatlantic relations and world order. Um, I think that's an exaggeration. I'm really worried about the domestic side of things, right? I think
So to me, it feels like this is all connected, though.
it
Like,
is.
in other words, how do we implode? How does our democracy implode, but we still remain the financial leader and center of the world? Like,
Because
I don't see how
the
that.
the potential replacements to us all have even more serious domestic political problems of their own, right? So, just if you think about it on the financial side, right? If nobody wants to hold dollars anymore because we can't make any credible commitments, we make agreements with countries and we break them, we don't follow the rules of any institutions, and we're not a democracy anymore. That's true, but all of those problems are actually worse with Xi Jinping in China, right? And then the alternative to that is maybe the Europeans step up. And I know too much about, European integration and the politics of the EU to really be optimistic about the Germans and the French or the EU as a whole stepping in and playing like a leadership role because they have their own collective action problems within the EU and all kinds of domestic politics and their own far right parties at home that are getting somewhere between 20 and 30% of the vote. And um, so like it's not that things are good at home, they are very bad, but in many ways at the global level, like the US from an economic perspective is the least ugly contestant in the beauty contest, right? I
Okay.
worry a lot more on the security side, right? The what we've done with NATO, you've seen me talk about this on Blue Sky, you know, I think threatening our NATO allies with territorial aggression is an immediate presidency ending scandal, right? Something that
Yeah.
should be beyond the pale for an American president. I don't know that rebuilding the transatlantic security alliance is something that can happen. But that doesn't mean like the Europeans are going to into China's arms on security, right? So,
Right.
so I worry much more about what's going on with Iran and NATO and things like that. That on the security policy side, it feels like we've crossed into something different. On the economic policy side, like we start an illegal war with Iran, and American bonds have gone up less than all the other countries' bonds, and the dollar has appreciated by 5%. And it's like, there are no alternatives on the financial side. And so that means like going forward, we could be a really ugly competitive authoritarian regime at home that is still the dominant power in international relations. And that's scary in the sense that we got used to having this liberal international order, which while we often broke the rules, we didn't break them to the degree that we're breaking them now. Right.
Yeah.
So I like again, I'm like I wrestle with both of these things that I if people say the sky is falling about American democracy, I actually worry about that. If people say the sky is falling and everything is different about international relations, I don't actually think that's true. And you actually see that with you look at the reactions of Mark Carney and Keir Starmer and all the G7 leaders a month after Davos, right? So Carney gets up at Davos and gives this great speech about lamenting, you know,
This is the greengrocer speech.
yeah, yeah. So we have 80 years of peace and world order, and yes, the U.S. didn't always follow it, but we basically everybody abided by the rules, and it did all these great things, and that's gone, and now we have to fend for ourselves. And then what does he do? The first statement he issues after we start the war in Iran
I know.
mentions doesn't mention world order, doesn't mention the UN Charter, doesn't mention the UN Security Council, nothing about like the things that he said were so important to Canada. It's basically a very milk toast. We're going to stand by our ally, again, doing a thing in the Middle East just like we didn't like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And that to me was really striking of like, if you really thought everything was different, you'd be calling
Yeah.
out the US right now and basically saying the US is now the rogue state.
Yeah, it's funny. I skeeted something about it was something snarky, like I guess we're putting the sign back up or something. And there were a lot of Canadians who got really angry and they're like, you didn't see what he said after or whatever. Let's talk about Iran though.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, what what you make of where this goes from here, because it looks like an absolute shit show.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's the economic,
Yeah,
I don't think we're going to get all the way back to 1970s level oil shocks because I don't think this is going to last long enough for that to happen. Right? I still think like at some point Trump is going to, taco to some degree.
yeah.
Uh,
Say more about that? Well, how do you think he extricates? Because it seems like this is not like, how does he walk back at this
I,
point?
he's already talking about like we won the war, right? Without declaring the objectives. The only good thing about giving 17 different reasons about going to war is none of which are valid, is now you have a menu to pick off of to declare that we accomplished our objectives, right? Um, so I don't think either the US or the Iranians really want this to be a protracted conflict. Right. I think Bibi would be perfectly happy if this goes on for years and the Israelis now have carte blanche to just do whatever they want in terms of bombing Iran on an ongoing basis. But I don't think Trump wants that. So in the what does that mean over the next month and how we get out of this? I don't know. But I think he's going to decide that there was some set of objectives that were again achieved and they will be enough to get the Strait of Hormuz open enough that we're not going to be talking about $200 barrel of oil and stagflation. Um, I think it
So
I think it then festers, but it festers at a much lower level than sort
Paul
of
and Dan are saying that there's a ship headed to the Middle East with 200 Marines on it.
right.
I mean,
So
here's the other thing, Mark. Is it possible that Trump doesn't know what the F he's talking about?
I mean that's generally my first reaction. My first assumption is that, and I work from there. Um, yes, I think that's true. I think um, the people below him do, and there's a bureaucratic battle that we're not entirely privy to of what Rubio wants versus what Hegseth wants versus what Bissent wants, and there's some set of infighting. I don't think Pete Hegseth is going to fully win that battle. Right? If you told me Pete Hegseth is going to win the bureaucratic battle for Trump's ear, then yeah, this could continue at a really high
What
level.
are the competing agendas here? Because that's where I'm having like we kind of expect Trump to do shit that makes no sense.
Right. And he
Okay,
also
so like so
he
that's
listens to
that's
the last person who has his ear.
so who are the people like what are the different factions and what are they fighting about? What is like is I mean Pete Hegseth has this whole white nationalist ideology. I don't know if like there's some, you know,
Right.
Armageddon. I don't know what that like maybe that's the end game and then what there's probably some you know business interests and grifters and whatever who are going to make money off of this. And so I'm just trying to unpack like what are the because my what I continue to hammer on is MAGA has a bunch of different factions.
Right. Right.
And they all have like their different ideological agendas. And sometimes they're aligned and then sometimes they conflict. You know, the tech bros have their own, you know, agenda here.
Right.
So what do you see in terms of all of these different strains and what is causing some of the bureaucratic infighting?
Yeah. So I don't know exactly who is the leader of each one of these, but I think you can think about um, Rubio doesn't really care about the Middle East. It's not clear what he wants to do as Secretary of State other than be Secretary of State. He probably would like to move on to Cuba, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Scott Bessent is supposed to be the closest thing to a Trump one adult in the room, who probably is the one thinking about like the economy and oil prices and is this going to be, a global economic disaster. Um, Hegseth is a child who wants to bomb people and a
Hmm.
white nationalist, and I think it's not more complicated than that. You hear what he's talking about and the way he talks about things, and it's appalling, but there's no strategic agenda there. I think there's a group of people in the Republican Party and the Trump administration who basically have bought completely Bibi Netanyahu's view of the world about Iran, right?
Which is, can you articulate?
Which is, you know, also lots of my fellow members of the American Jewish community have bought this for the last 30 years, which is Iran is an existential threat, right? The mere existence of this regime is justification for doing anything, right? Bombing them, sanctions, ground operations, maybe even dropping nuclear weapons on them, etc. But there's nothing you can do as long as this regime exists. They do bad stuff, and anything the Israelis want to do. Bibi has tried to get multiple previous presidents, my understanding is, to let him do what is going on now, and they resisted. Right. And so there's a Trump or a group of people in the Trump administration have basically bought into the way to deal with the Iran problem is not to have a JCPOA, right? It's not to say no to the Israelis except on limited strikes and things like that. It's to let them and actually join in actively with them in something that's close to a full-on war. So I don't know who wins that, but I think the more economic pain there is and the more this goes on, after 2 weeks, it's very clear it's a disaster. All right. It's not like it's going well. So I think Bissent, Rubio, some combination of people who have not bought into what Bibi is selling or what Pete Hegseth is selling are basically going to tell Trump at some point you need to cut your losses.
Yeah.
And, he listens to the last person. So I don't know like how bad it's going to get. And I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't think this is going to go all the way until like 2028, that this is just a sort of Iraq, Afghanistan. It's going to go on forever. Partly because they haven't planned for that. Like there's no planning at all.
I
Right.
mean, yes, but that again, that is a
Yeah.
given.
But if you
That is,
want if you want a war to go on for 5 years or 10 years, there's a baseline level of logistical planning that has to happen. And we seem to be running out of ammunition after.
I was just about to say we're okay, so this feels bad. And I know
Right.
you're not like a military strategist, but
Yeah.
it feels bad to run out of munitions.
Yeah, and again, I'm not an expert, so I don't know if that's actually true. And also, you know, American industrial capacity is stuff that we can quickly repurpose things to produce ammunition if we really needed to.
Is it that
Um,
quick though?
I
I thought it
sus
took a long
I
time.
suspect we're not at the point of actually running out of ammunition,
Okay.
but that is not my bailiwick in terms of, what are
I
our
don't know.
thoughts of top
I feel like with the Trump administration, it is entirely possible that we are like, down to the last bullet or something.
Yeah.
Um, what else are you thinking about right now? So you're a pessimist on American democracy, or do you
Yeah.
feel like we are barreling towards a competitive autocracy? Tell us what that looks like, what that means, and what you say about being optimistic on the economic front to me is actually really worrying because the only thing that gets people to pay attention because this country seems to be
Yeah.
asleep at the wheel. Like if people go back to, lower gas price, like then they're fine. They'll just sleepwalk their way, as we've been doing,
Yes,
into
absolutely.
this whole thing, right? Like so in some ways, I was kind of counting on this whole thing is going to go to shit. And
Yes.
people, we're going to have like bread lines or like, I don't even know. And
And
that's what's going to get people to
I've
rise
had
up.
that conversation with people over the last couple of years. The problem with that is we had COVID and fixed it. And like Biden didn't get benefit for that, but also things getting that bad didn't change things. So I'm less clear that there's like a pain point economically that will bring the whole house of cards down. Um, I mean, I think on the democracy stuff, like we're speed running a horse race between normal American politics and a slide into, something between democracy and full autocracy. All right. So the normal American politics is you're going to get slaughtered in the midterms, and the Democrats are going to take the House back and possibly the Senate. And the next 2 years will be bad, but it'll be like Trump's first term where you have checks because you have legislative checks and we have a Congress that's actually going to act and exercise power. Um, the other side is he's going to illegally federalize elections. There's going to be mass voter suppression. It's not a free and fair thing. The Democrats either don't win or they win, and the disaster scenario is like Trump says there was so much fraud, the election is invalid, and the current legislature stays in power until we clear out the fraud.
Yeah.
And at that point, you know, lots of people on Blue Sky and other people are like, you're overreacting when you say that it can't possibly happen. But my view on things is like, that's probably a low probability event. But if it happens, who's going to stop him? Because he's
Yeah.
gotten away with everything else at this point. Um,
Is it really a low probability event though? I mean, he's got this like EO written and ready to go to
so,
have.
what happens there's this concept of competitive authoritarianism, which comes from Steve Levitsky at Harvard and Luke and Wei at Toronto, and they were writing books about this in Latin America and elsewhere a decade ago. Of like, you know, it's not a dictatorship. We're not talking about full-on authoritarianism, but it's short of democracy. And it has to do with things like political opponents being harassed, putting your thumb on the scale for the incumbent party, whether that's media or lawsuits or things like that. And are the elections fully free and fair? No. But in general, like you can't steal an election if unless it's close,
Yeah.
right? So if we're talking 120,000 votes in four swing states, you can steal an election. If we're
Hmm.
talking about hanging chads in Florida, you can steal an election, right? If the Democrats, you look at all the special elections and things like that, it's like if the Democrats win 240 seats in Congress and the baseline vote is something like 56-44 for the Democrats, it's probably too far away for them to steal,
Yeah.
right? That's kind of how I think about it. Like it's not zero, but if it came down to one state, right? And we're talking about a couple seats for control. Yeah, then you have, look, this whole thing with January 6th started with Georgia
Yeah.
in December beforehand, right?
Hmm.
So I could imagine that type of scenario of it is really close. And that's where you were talking about the economy, right? So if one of the things I think Trump is going to taco out about this is if the economy is a full-on oil shock stagflation crisis in October, then the Republicans are going to get destroyed in the midterm elections. And so those things kind of start to fit together. Um, but again, I don't know. I've given up on assigning probabilities to all of these events
Yeah.
because we're so far past all the off ramps where I thought Congress would act or he wouldn't be allowed to get away with these things. And I
Yeah.
don't know that my
Well,
radar is good anymore.
I want to open it up for questions in just a bit, but I did want to get to this because this is one thing that you skeet about a lot, and I am totally on board, which is this guy should have been impeached a long time ago. And,
Yep.
because, this is where I get stuck when I start talking, is people are like, well, what are the guardrails? And it's like, there are none now.
None.
Like
None.
that's the final escape valve. Like that was, the Southwest pilot who like pulls the thing and slides out. Like that's what we should have been doing.
Right.
Do you think if Democrats win in November, is that possible?
So, the thing I worry about, you brought it up already, is like happened when Biden was elected and probably would have happened if Harris had won. It's like, all right, it was bad. Things are back to normal because we won. All right. But the problem is in a two-party system, the incumbents are eventually going to lose, right?
Mhm.
Because the economy is bad, because something happens, right? Democrats winning elections forever is not a strategy for protecting democracy. And right now we have one pro-democracy party and one authoritarian party, right? So you've probably seen me skeet about this of like the the thing that has to happen for this not to be an ongoing permanent threat is we have to fix our institutions, right? And basically, we need to become a multi-party democracy. So you look around at like European parliamentary democracies, pretty much every European country, roughly 20 to 30% of the population these days votes for the far right parties, right? Which means 70 to 80% is not, and you have governing coalitions where the far right is rarely in power. We have a two-party system which takes that 20 to 30%. Right. I basically believe political spectrums are the same across rich democracies. So, like, the number of people who are really voting for authoritarianism, I think, is 20
Yeah.
to 30%. And
Yeah.
then you've got the 20% that convinces themselves they're voting for something else as they vote for the Republicans they've always voted for. Right. But there's no other option if you're a Republican or independent who's always voted Republican who says, I can't vote for the Democrats. Right. And so, until we have proportional representation, multi-member districts. We fix the Senate by adding more states. We add seats to the Supreme Court. Like all these things, every one of America's institutions is counter-majoritarian,
Yeah.
right? And the part that worries me is like when you start talking about that, people are like, you're a pointy-headed political scientist. Nobody could get elected running on institutions. Like Obama ran on healthcare, Biden ran on fixing the economy. The next Democrat needs to like provide policy. The problem is providing the policy didn't fix the authoritarian problem, right? Obama passed the ACA. It didn't moderate the Republican Party. Biden fixed the economy, didn't moderate the Republican Party. Like this Republican Party is not going to moderate.
Hmm.
So you need to be a durable democracy. It needs to be the case that the Democrats can lose and democracy is not in peril.
Yeah.
Right? That's Adam Shawarski is one of the most famous political scientists in the world. He's in his 80s now at NYU. Like his classic definition of democracy is a system where parties lose elections.
Hmm.
Right? There's always another election. You get to exercise power. You lose and you leave, and you
Yeah.
abide by the rules. So we don't have two parties that both believe that anymore.
Yeah.
And the only way for the Democrats to be able to lose and it not to be a democracy crisis is for there to be a pro democracy center right party,
Yeah.
which means we need reforms to basically make us a parliamentary system. Like we're not going to amend the Constitution, but there's stuff you can do to mimic that with normal legislation. So that's where I worry that like, yeah, the Democrats win in 2026, maybe they even win in 2028. and just go back to normal politics, which means
Yep.
the next Republican is going to be representing the far right authoritarian party, and like you rerun it,
Yep.
right? And I'm roughly your age. Like our whole adult lives from 2000 onward is basically hoping that the moderation of the existing Republican Party will happen after they lose a big election.
And it's just moved farther and farther.
It
Yeah,
doesn't happen because the institutions incentivize you to move to the right,
that's right.
right? So that's what I worry. That's the part I worry about, much more like all this stuff domestically. Like we could still be the big, ugly economic and geopolitical power in international relations, right? While we're run by semi-authoritarians. And I think that's the thing that Americans have a really hard time getting their head around,
Yeah.
right? That, the decline in our democracy means everything is different about our position in the world. And it's uncomfortable to realize that that might not be the case.
Yeah.
Because we like to think of ourselves as the good guys in international relations. Right.
Well, I'm going to stop recording and then let people ask some questions. So, one second. Let's see.
Are you going
Uh,
to curate or moderate this or?
oh,